Slightly above average gamers, way above average podcast. Welcome to the Slightly Above Average Gaming Podcast with your hosts, J007tv and SuboneKD.
Welcome everybody to episode 27 of the Slightly Above Average Gaming Podcast. I am J007tv. I am joined as always by SuboneKD, and we have a very special guest this week. Sub, why don't you go ahead and introduce our guest, man?
Thanks, Jay. So today we are joined by the ever amazing and wonderful Chad of Duty. Chad is a feller out there on the COD Twitterverse, who has taken it upon himself to help corral the army of rogue cats that I would say is everyone who wants to report a bug in Call of Duty, collect them all together, sort them out, figure out what the heck is going on and who's full of stuff and who's actually got a problem. And then compile it into a repertoire of problems that Call of Duty can actually take a look at, make sense of, and actually take action on. It is an amazing undertaking, and it is something that I barely can wrap my head around the fact that you have basically done this solo. And for anyone who doesn't know, I have done QA for a major software company before. And so I have been down the road that Chad is on right now. And so when I say that it is just an impressive undertaking that he's done here, I'm speaking of that from experience, from direct hands-on experience. But Chad, enough of my yammering. Welcome to the podcast. Why don't you
Thanks for
tell us a
having
little
me.
bit about yourself?
I'm almost 26 years old somehow. I'm in Virginia, East Coast, U.S. Been a COD fan for coming up on 20 years. I'm just about to enter 19 years. I started with Big Red 1, the PS2 port of COD 2, and kind of followed the hype train of FPSs growing up. I grew up with Halo first, my first video game of all time. Combat Evolved is where I got my roots. So I grew up with Bungie. I grew up with these amazing creative minds and masterminds behind the FPS scene. And somehow I landed in COD 10 years later. And once I started to see it grow on YouTube in the MW2, MW3 sort of trio of years, I realized how much creativity the players and passion, I guess, the players had for the games, and just frankly how addictive and consistently fun and fluid the core gunplay was. It still hasn't been matched to this day on controller. So it's just been a pleasure watching this franchise grow for 2 decades plus, and I wish I could have been there from COD 1, but I got pretty close. So I guess I missed
Great.
the whole point of being a feedback guy, but hopefully that was a good intro. I guess we can either segue right into the feedback stuff.
No worries. So
I love COD. That's my whole presence.
Perfect. So just in case anybody needs to know, which I think everybody should, we are recording this kind of in the evening, a week prior to, almost maybe even 2 weeks prior to when we're actually going to publish this, just because the timing worked out, and that's how it worked out. So we're kind of just spitballing this a little bit, and this is actually Jay and I's second episode in a day. So if we sound a little discombobulated, we've been talking all day. Jay's been streaming pretty much. He's been basically talking for like 8 hours straight at this point. So bear with us as we grind through this episode and have and hopefully have a great conversation and a great look at what Chad has been doing.
Well, the reason why it was my idea. So I've been streaming. Chad has been coming into my stream the last couple days. He hopped into the Discord. I pulled him up into voice channel, and he and I were just kind of vibing, right? Like we're talking about Call of Duty and like the things we liked and the things that we don't like, those kind of things. And he has such a great insight on just how things are. And so we're talking, and like 20 minutes later, I'm like, holy shit, I don't know what we're going to do here. Like, I'm supposed to have him on the podcast like next week. And then sub one comes in and I'm like, hang on, I have an idea. I'm like, let's go ahead and just record this episode now, strike while the iron's hot kind of thing. So,
Yep.
Yep.
and I'm very thankful, Chad, that, you're willing to hop on here with us. Sub and I both care about Call of Duty. We're obviously very passionate about it. We love gaming in general, and our podcast isn't 100% Call of Duty, but it's probably about 98%, if I had to guess.
Right,
So
especially right now.
Thank you so much for hopping. Yeah,
No
especially
worries.
right now, and and it's what's relevant, and so thank you to you both for taking the time to go ahead and hop on, and discuss this stuff with us.
Absolutely.
Awesome.
So I want to get into like kind of the project that you launched that got my attention, and a lot of other people's attention as well. And I wanted to kind of hear from you a little bit about how the idea came about, what you had to do, like kind of like talk me through your process, your thoughts, like what was going on and how you created it, and then we can kind of delve a little bit into the QA side of it, because I mean you took on a monumental project. For anybody who does not know, he launched a Trello board. So if anybody's not familiar with Call of Duty's Trello board, Trello is a company that makes a message board for tracking issues and bugs and things like that. And Call of Duty has long had a Trello board of their own where they display bugs and known issues that they're working on. They can also convey, they've used it in the past to convey things like, upcoming schedule changes and, seasonal updates and things that we should know as a player base. So they've kind of used it to communicate with us as the players. And Chad took it upon himself to launch what he called the COD Community Trello Board. And it was like mind-numbing for me to think about the amount of work that you had to do to make it work. But why don't you tell us what the COD Community Trello Board was, and then we'll dig into a little bit about the nuts and bolts of it.
Yeah, explain the process too, Chad, because you were talking to me about that earlier, like what all that entailed. So please, explain that as well, please.
Right. So Sledgehammer, or any COD developer modernly, they've kind of grown to use Trello as an interface to not collect community feedback, but instead relay upcoming fixes or content or WXP weekends, outgoing information to the players. And ever since Vanguard, when I started to catch on to Sledgehammer's sort of knack for engaging with the community and just being this like bright spark of a studio that really does care about what COD feels like fundamentally in gameplay, regardless of what setting their game was set in. I think there's going to forever be kind of conversations about what Vanguard could have been or should have been, but the core gameplay of Vanguard was so incredibly smooth, consistent, fluid. It just got me. I don't to this day really know why. It's very similar to MW3's in movement, ADS speeds, map design. You have a couple maps coming over from Vanguard. So I got really latched on to previously in World War II, the progression systems, collections, prestige, the headquarters. And then when I got to Vanguard, I got really attached to the gameplay. So I'm starting to fall in love with this studio. It's a bit smaller, kind of underdog, but loves to communicate with their fans. And they did so through this Trello interface. And I was trying to find a way to sort of not only connect with them, maybe because I wanted to become a developer myself, which is still somewhat true. And I just simply care about the products. I care about them as a studio. And I found that if I just sort of reverse the roles of their Trello board, so instead of relaying outgoing fixes and events to us, I'm sort of flipping back on them to give them feedback that we have about their game's functionalities or how it's generally designed in gameplay or a balance. I just wanted to find an outlet for the community to feel heard, since I know that they would be the studio to grab onto that first. And it just happened that when I first did the Trello board, it was during Vanguard. So I knew that they would sort of latch onto the concept at least, and I might get some feedback on when I make a good QA tester, when I make a good developer, are there better avenues to keep the community engaged? And there were flaws to it too. There's no way for people to really comment back and forth conversationally on a Trello board because it's all divided into cards. So unbeknownst to me until I started doing Reddit posts, we'll get to this later, did I realize there was no conversational component of it. It was very one-directional, void of just give Chad feedback and he'll send it back out to Sledgehammer. But it didn't really engage the community as a whole, so I think there was some downsides to that Trello board. But the main way I kind of started it was how can I connect fans to developers? Which team is the most receptive to community conversation? And I guess I just landed on Trello board because they were using it, and I also used it in high school for organizing assignments and keeping on top of college stuff. So it just all felt very natural to me. But that's
Right.
kind of the beginning of that.
Awesome.
If you want to jump off to another point.
Well, we'll sit on this for a little bit because it's super interesting. So you were in Modern Warfare 2, I believe, when it first kind of reared its head.
Yeah.
And if I remember right, you kind of, that's when it kind of like kind of burst onto the scene, and people started paying a lot of attention to it and interacting with it and kind of and talking about it.
Yeah.
And what I remember about it at that time is that you were hand testing every report. Is that true?
Mm-hmm.
And then
I was, and I still am, for all the bugs that ended up going on the Trello board. If I could repro it on my own game client, this is like PC Battle.net. So if there were console-specific issues, I really couldn't get into them. But I just had a desire to not just flat out steal people's sort of content, either their bug report demonstration videos or their bug demonstration sort of videos, or outright copy paste their tweets or their DMs or their messages to my surveys outright. And I did, in a way, kind of, I still do that with either the Trello board or Reddit posts. There were points where I would utilize people's clips and kind of integrate them into mine. Or if I was really unlucky with reproing, I just use their video, use their words, and ship it. Like I didn't get to every single issue, but for the majority of the bugs on the Trello and the Reddit posts I do now, I take the basic idea of what people think is going wrong or know is going wrong. I hop on my game, see if I can reproduce it just from hearsay, or if I can't do it by hearsay, I'll go on like Reddit or YouTube and try to find people reporting that issue visually, and I'll just kind of repeat it myself using their sort of background, and then I'll get a video of it, put on-screen text where I have to edit, render, export it, and then put it onto whether it be the Trello card or a Reddit post body, and then that will kind of complement the written component of it, which is just repro steps, what the issue is, what platform it was on. But yeah, very QA, but I did as much testing as I humanly could, which was a time sink of, I guess, the project. Yeah.
Yeah.
On average, about how long did that take you? Like,
oh god.
Obviously, each issue is going to probably be different, but like, are we talking like days at a time, or like an hour or two, or like how did that work?
There were days where it was sporadic. With MW2, I was sort of in this unfortunate state where I was, my grandpa was suffering from a stage 4 cancer we caught very late, so I was always in and out of the hospital, and really lost time to play throughout the middle half of the year. But in the more ideal seasons of content or making the Trello boards or the feedback projects, I would spend honestly upwards of 6 to 8 hours a day doing it. There were full work days or longer where I just lose track of time, and I wasn't always the most efficient at this. I would like not like how a certain repro video came out, because I would have too many like intermittent movements when I was trying to capture one thing and focus on it. But instead of just editing it out, I would just recapture the whole bug repro. I got very sloppy with some things recording wise. I would just re-record, write it out, erase it, write it out again, more simply or more concisely. There was a lot of trial and error to making the Trello card / Reddit posts. So there's a lot of wasted time, quote unquote. I'm just trying to perfectionist the output product. But yeah, I did spend some full days, sun up, sun down, just testing, at least conceptualizing, editing, and then putting it out for the people to see. But I don't have a good hour count throughout the whole year or by month. I wish I would have kept track of that, because it would have been really cool to know. But I kind of missed out on that. I didn't track time or workflow very well. It just sort of happened, and I put it out.
Well,
management
when
would
it's
be
a
very
labor of
unhappy
love
with you.
like that,
Yeah.
yeah. When it's a labor of love like that, does it really, are you really going to track it?
No, I don't think so.
So I mean that I think
Because there was no structure.
that's what's impressive about what you're doing.
Yeah.
In my mind, and like I told you earlier, as a Call of Duty community member, I thank you for just the work you've tried to do, and
Hmm.
I feel like you've had based on what you've told us so far, you have a good process for how you're trying to replicate these things, then how you're trying to disseminate what the actual issues are. So I feel like you're actually on to something. I don't know if you know that yet, but like you're on to something, man.
I like to hope so. I
So
mean, it would be fun
yeah,
to
go
get
ahead.
into the QA scene at some point in any industry. At this point, it might be time to kind of branch out from just the tunnel vision of gaming. But part of I guess the answer I missed in the why did I start it was not just to connect with Sledgehammer or the community or take feedback. There's a lot of that, but it was that back of the head thing of I just finished college and got through a pandemic, got a bachelor's in psychology, and didn't know what to do with that degree. I still don't. I don't have much passion for that field. So I'm in this dead zone of I've lost these years to a pandemic, to retail work, to not really feeling the passion for my own field of study, and trying to pivot somewhere else. And I keep on landing on game dev, but it's been hard to find just the spark of hope that will ever happen with the industry taking the trajectory it has the last
Yeah.
couple of years. It's just they really do value senior talent, which could be a good thing. It means you get better products more efficiently. You don't have to teach anyone, paying for the internship or paying for the training time. It must be so easy relying on senior talent, but I think if you don't make an opening for newbies, to put it in the gamer speak, then you may not know what you're missing. I hope at no point during this I kind of insinuate that I'm like let down by Activision or let down by Sledgehammer, because they don't owe me anything legally,
Yeah.
fi- financially, morally. They don't owe me anything because there was no professional connection ever made. There was never a contract, never an NDA, never oh you can't tell people about this, you can't give them closure on this issue being fixed. It's been very casual. Very if they can't tell me something, they just won't, because they know I have no contractual agreement to
Yeah.
keep my mouth shut. So they watch their mouth, I watch mine, just kind of naturally, and there's good dialogue to keep us in
Good.
touch either way. But yeah, never anything too official. So this was a very unofficial feedback project or set of projects that kind of came out of nowhere, just out of the passion of
So it's
connecting with others and trying to get into game dev.
so it's so interesting to kind of watch your workflow and hear you talk about it, because in so I worked in QA for several years. I worked done multiple companies, both large companies and small companies, and the process, there's really there's a lot of flexibility from company to company depending on kind of their corporate philosophy, but there's kind of an
Right.
overall QA methodology, and you've really nailed it in a lot of ways when it comes to being able to process customer feedback, which is kind of unique.
Mm-hmm.
When I worked in QA, a lot of times, and I worked for other tech companies where I've been on both sides of the customer report coin. And what happens a lot of times is a customer or a user will they'll file a report and they'll say, "Hey, this thing doesn't work when," and being able to hunt down and reproduce the problem reliably is always like the big challenge, and then figure out why the problem exists and whether it's customer error or an actual bug is something that is it is difficult to kind of get good at, I would say, because a
It
lot of
is.
times so in my experience, what would happen is a customer would write in. They say, "Oh, I want to upload this file, and it doesn't display when I'm done." And
Right.
it would be very easy to say, "Well, I upload a file to an account and it works fine. I don't see a problem. Close the problem, move on." And so a lot of times that's where it ends. And so what a good QA person will do is they can sit there and they'll gather the information they need what system are you using. They'll check all kinds of different aspects, and then they will find different ways of testing the limits of it.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it's they can reproduce the problem under certain conditions, and then under other conditions it doesn't apply, right? And trying to sort
Mm-hmm.
out what the root cause of the issue is usually what makes a good QA over a soon to be looking for work QA, right? Especially when their job is to reproduce user bugs. So I say that because when I look at your work, I find it really, really accurate and reproduced very well for how kind of we did it, right? I mean, Call of Duty, from listening to and watching how Call of Duty rolls out fixes and develops stuff, I can tell that their methodology and the methodology of the company, one of the companies I work for, are very similar. So
Mm-hmm.
I feel confident, kind of comparing them as apples and apples in a lot of ways, even though it wasn't a game dev company I worked for. And so watching you fill those shoes and kind of fill that role very, very clearly, how much, like where did that come from? Did you go through and did you get help? Did you take classes? Like, where did you
Mm.
learn this, or did you just figure it out naturally?
When I kind of go back in my memory to figure out the answer to that, I land on not so much either formal college education or work training. I worked retail, Walmart, stocking groceries, Target, unloading trucks for the 2 or 3 years of the pandemic, early years of the pandemic, and so this is coming right out of college where I was just sort of full student, no job for a while. But so I have no tech industry experience at all, no basic QA, no programming, no game dev, no internships, because frankly, they all require you being in an active degree path. And right now, I'm just not in that position, so I can't even get internships. That's how kind of tight it is. But I go back to the last 2 years, really short term, and I did reach out to more recently from W3 at the launch window, the QA lead, Mike, who is fairly vocal on Twitter and available for those that want to reach out to him and give some bug insight or I have to get his at later, but he's the only QA lead I know of that's really out there on the social media space. And I asked him one day, is there any way I can just give you guys better feedback? And he sat there and he said, well, this is what makes a good bug report. When did it start happening? What happened? What did you expect versus the actual result? And they taught me how to read a part of the number character string in the bottom right of the screen whenever you're playing MW3. There's a bunch of jumbled numbers and letters and parentheses. And he told me how to figure out where the two chunks of numbers that are most helpful for them when they're reproing internally, which is the change log and the patch version number. And they told me what two parts of that string are those two things and how I could potentially, if I were to go back and repro the bugs myself and not just take it from community surveys, and I could reproduce it on my computer, I could provide them the description, the platform, the date, the patch number, the change log, and then all of a sudden I have a literal QA caliber report, maybe minus like lingo and syntax. I don't have formal training. I can get close. I can almost get there, close enough to get them started. Because whenever they can sort of pinpoint a tweet or a Reddit thread of an issue, especially when it has a video or a screenshot attached, they have an ability to open a case with people on the team that work QA and higher up to make a case that we did fix this. This isn't working quite right. Once they have that physical, tangible evidence, they can start fixing. So I just kind of wanted to be the bridge that gives them the concrete visual evidence. That's why I'm so stuck on having a video and screenshot as much as I can. Or at least the identifying change log, patch stuff, like I said before. And then so I asked him, the QA side of the dev team on social media, how to refine written bug reports, or I'll just go to Ethan, the community specialist, just to see how he's doing. Is he up to reading another Reddit post full of my nonsense? And he'll go through on the Sledgehammer Games Reddit account or Twitter account, and he'll try to reply to issues that he's kind of greenlit to give some closure updates on. So he's helpful with the sort of logistical, are they seeing my feedback? He gives me the reassurance that the team is broadly aware of my presence.
which
That's
is
kind of the big
amazing.
reason why I kept doing these things, because
Yeah.
Sledgehammer is just remarkably good at giving closure, that they're even seeing what I'm saying. So, yeah, I totally lost my train of thought where I started with all that. But
No
um,
worries.
I go to devs on Twitter to learn, because they
Hey,
seem to be the most receptive,
that's
and
great.
uh, they've been so great.
So
Those two.
at what point did that start happening? Right, like at what point did you go from just a casual Call of Duty fan to you actually have the ear of the QA folks for Sledgehammer? Like, was that kind of a thing where you had to like build a relationship, build trust,
Mm.
or you they started actually paying attention to the things you were putting out? Like, when did that happen?
I know chronologically that it happened towards the late summer, the end of Vanguard's life cycle, that I first played with this idea of doing a Trello board. And I think, what was it? It was no, I'm thinking backwards. I gave them an idea to do something in game, and they did it at the end of the year, and I was so impressed. It was that one time. I think it only happened once in Vanguard, the very last week of its life, where they did the message of the day scannable QR code to do a feedback survey on bugs and feedback. Uh, or no, it was the playlist update. The playlist. What playlist do you want to see in multiplayer QR code survey? I gave them the idea to do that with one of my first sort of like cards on my first Trello boards, and to see that come to the game at the end of the life cycle was so remarkably cool that it kind of went from this experimental, I'm just some bored kid in a pandemic with time off playing this game I really love. I love the gameplay of Vanguard and the maps, and just sort of like the gimmicks of operator progression and dynamic maps. Everything people hated, I loved for some reason. But so I fell for the game's gameplay. I fell for Sledgehammer's sort of charm and community interactions. I jump into Trello, started playing with these like QA-esque bug report things. But once I started to see the occasional like on a tweet of mine when I was like tweeting at them with the Trello link, it would just say like by Sledgehammer Games, or thanks for the insight, Chad. A couple words came in replies, or a DM or two. That just kind of shot my confidence up, and I just kept on pushing it. Um, but I just don't know what event sort of cemented it as a project I wanted to keep on doing long term, and long term being
Mhm.
a year. But
Yeah.
so maybe mid 2022 was the first board / QA inkling. I guess that also gave birth to the whole I could be a developer someday daydream. But because I didn't really
So
think in those terms in college or prior.
yeah, understandable. And it's funny because I had a very similar experience. So I went to college in a dual degree program in of American history and legal ethics for the purpose of going to law school. And literally, like a week before I took my LSAT, I was like, I hate sitting in school and wasting my time, so I'm going to go off and try and make
I
some
feel
money.
that.
And jumped into the tech field, kind of right off the bit, doing a lot of sales and customer service. So it was kind of an
Mm-hmm.
interesting, so my journey there was a lot of bumping around, forcing my way in, and so I I have a lot of respect for what you're doing and the way that you're approaching it, because it's very different than what a lot of other folks do. And
Yeah.
so we can delve into that a little bit later in the episode, but the whole response from Sledgehammer has been great. But how about the community? Like
They've
how have
been
regular users responded, and do you get any hate about this stuff?
I guess first question I'll say the overall response from the community, everyday players that know of my two sort of categories of feedback projects has been positive. Uh, it makes them feel heard. I think where this year at launch MW3 they didn't put out a feedback site at first. So the first 3 or 4 months with like a survey for bugs and a survey for general feedback. And I did push some concerns to them about that, and they've since rectified it with an Activision feedback page window for MW3. But I was like, it's hard to feel heard when you don't have any outlets to give feedback, formal, written, visual, submit a file here. Uh, maybe that was also a precursor to why I did these projects. I didn't know where to put my feedback in a way that I thought was reciprocated or heard or appreciated. So I made my own little format with the Trello at the start. But the community seems to be very positive with it. They've, if not just being heard, it gives people who have more niche concerns, like decals not showing up on riot shields. It's like
I saw that.
Remember the guy last year? Fix the sleeves. The sleeves were flapping too much in the wind where there was no fucking wind. Like that kind of stuff.
Killing me because I remember that.
And although those issues may not be game breaking or even game altering, I realized that when people fester in that place of, I had this issue that kind of ticks me off, visual quirk or this missing detail that was in other games. I just don't feel heard, and I don't care if the issue isn't significant, but just not feeling appreciated because my feedback is quote unquote less severe or less lower priority. That kind of got me a bit of a spark, kind of added a spark to my flame with the Trello boards early on. Was just not letting anyone feel left out, no matter how nuanced their feedback was in format or their content. I just
which is amazing and
be the guy that kind of amplified everyone.
It's super
as far
commendable.
As hate goes, I'll get the occasional you're a shill, you're sucked in the you know what.
Nice.
You're just trying to get a job. Of course I am. Like, who wouldn't? It's with the level of work you input, no matter what format of project you're doing, at some point you're going to have that question of, can I make this into more? Can I profit off this? Can I make this my career?
Absolutely.
So the whole shill thing's a bit disappointing because little do they know I haven't made a single cent off of any of it. But so you're sitting there like hearing those occasional DMs come through, like, just fuck off, shill. Like, okay, thanks. I'll I don't know, punish myself for putting in 8 hours of QA testing for free because you think I'm a shill. That's really helpful. Or they'll just give bad feedback, like, hey, why don't you tell Sledge to go fix their fucking game? That's helpful. Like, okay, what about it? Like,
fix what?
You can get even just a bit better than that. Like, just give me a little bit more. Like, what doesn't feel right?
Yeah, Modern Warzone, right? He always gets that.
Oh yeah.
People think that he's like
the fix your game thing is miserable.
Thing. It's gotten to the point where it's like it's its own meme, but like people still don't get it, which I find hilarious. Like, and then
you can be vague, just don't be hostile.
Yeah, I mean, I'll post fix your game to him every now and again just because it's funny, and he knows that I do too. That. And I get so many people that get
they
angry.
shut you down.
Yeah. Yeah, they get mad.
Like, so they don't listen to people who are just malicious. So you can tell them as much as you want, like every racial slur in the book or how much they can't make games, but once they catch on to your account, your presence being that way, they'll just mute you and you'll never know it. You'll just be in the void of not being heard, and then ironically you'll be sitting there going, why don't you hear me? I'm so angry, because you're just not being constructive.
Yep.
I don't. People can be frustrated. They can be angry. They can be mad as shit about these games, but if you're not being at least somewhat humane to the people who are on the forefront or even the back end, you're just not going to make a difference of any meaningful value. You're not going to make the game any better for anyone. So you deserve to be kind of blocked out. But then I think about how passionate that anger is sometimes, like how loud they are and consistent they are in reposting that nonsense. If that was reworked into a weapon, like a utility of constructive feedback, that same level of passion and volume and almost tenacity could be used to make the biggest changes in the franchise's history. They're just one step away from changing their tone, their online whatever inflection, and they're they could be making Trello boards too, or making feedback threads too. So kind of part of my mission is to convert people from fix your game, your shit, to this is a list of issues I think could be worked on. I hope you see it. Have a good day. Thanks for all your work. And they'll be much more likely to grab onto that than the reverse.
Well, here's the thing. So Sub One and I are both actually fortunate enough to have made friends with people that are actual developers of this franchise, of this game, of Warzone. I'm not going to say who, because I don't want people to harass them, because I know how this community can be. People unfortunately will take their passion and anger and direct it towards, ground level developers who actually have no say essentially in how things go and how things work. And that to me, that's frustrating because I can sit there and look as an adult who's been in the business world for, 30 years or 25 years, however long, and know that there are certain decisions that were made that I guarantee you were not made by, whomever's working on, say, oh, I don't know, the environmental art for wars for, Urzikstan or whatever. Like those dudes and ladies don't have a say. They're just doing what they're asked for. And, many
Yep.
of those people, they love their job. They love the game, but
They
they're
totally
afraid
do.
to actually hop onto Call of Duty Twitter and, participate because honestly, people are shitheads.
People are shitheads.
I
That
gotta be
worries me
completely
too.
honest.
That's
Yeah.
like the best point to make. That's like the pinnacle of this whole conversation is the thing I want to avoid or kind of combat with these projects is the question of what happens when you've bullied your developers out of caring, out of a job even, or just out of social media's sort of communication spaces. When they start listening to you because you've been so hostile, who's to blame for the game not being at its best? They can make mistakes, they can have bad days, they can, as some people like to think, quote unquote, sabotage our fun. But frankly, if we approach with this constant harassing negativity online, I don't think we're owed better games. I don't think we're ever going to get that. Whatever we want to define as quote unquote better, we're too vague sometimes too. Like, again, if you're not being concise in your feedback, then make game more better, make gun more shooty, make map more colorful. It's just not the most helpful advice. So sometimes they don't know what changes to make, and then we don't get them, and we complain that we didn't get. Why aren't shotguns buffed in MW3? Because I don't think people really know what about the shotguns they need, down to the values and the detailed stats that they want changed to make them feel better. It's just make them more powerful. Okay, then if you don't tell them how and they overcorrect, then we have another like Infinite Warfare Proteus Day 1 situation where it's just aimbot across the map. So I don't know. You got to be very particular with your feedback nowadays, and not everyone's very good at doing that inherently. So you got to kind of guide them if you have that insight.
Well, a perfect example would have been, for me, in terms of, what you're talking about is so,
Mm-hmm.
you know, when Caldera came out, people were tired of the map. They stopped playing it. They went over to Rebirth. So they go to Rebirth, and then, sniping became an issue. They felt like they had to go in and like nerf the sniper rifles. Because people were tired of getting one tap from across the map on Rebirth. So ever since then, sniping has essentially been ruined in Big Map Warzone because of that.
Right.
And if they had felt comfortable enough to actually talk to the community, which I can't blame them for not doing it, I specifically could have told them how to fix it. Slow down the ADS, maybe add a little bit of muzzle sway, and slow down the fire rate for the Car 98 and the Swiss K31. You don't have to screw with the damage profile and break sniping for the rest of every single other sniper rifle ever since. And then if you really look at it, sniping for Warzone 2 was absolutely atrocious, pretty much non-existent. Like, they didn't have... Like, they should have felt good enough to get, or good enough about it to get feedback from the community. But because a lot of people in the community don't give constructive criticism and just want to constantly like nail on the negative and, act like these people are robbing them of like their livelihoods, why would they? Why would they want to hop on social media and participate in constructive, discussions? Sub, I mean, am I wrong here?
No, I mean, I think there are two different things at work when it comes to talking to developers about kind of your people's feedback about the game, right? Because sometimes there's a what you would call a creative direction, right? Where the developer, the product managers and heads and other stakeholders, whoever's got their hand in the cookie jar, so to speak, they'll sit down and they'll actually talk about kind of an overarching philosophy of what they want to see over either the full game or the next season, or whatever the case may be. And a lot of times they'll have different reasons for it, right? So I can tell you that sometimes the reason that they'll make changes is to encourage kind of the breaking of a monotony, right? Breaking of a stalemate, right? It's kind of the reason why we get buffs and nerfs with weapons, right? And a lot of times, some things may feel random, but the reality is they're trying to craft a kind of like they have an like an overarching idea of how they want the game to be flowing. And there can be different reasons behind it that we as players are not privy to, right? So we see map updates and we see weapon nerfs and buffs, and we're just like, what are they thinking? Like, why? And it's usually built around either a direct profit, right? They're going to buff a gun because they're going to release the Godzilla skin, or grenades because they're going to release a skin for it and they want to make some quick cash. Okay, easy peasy. But other times they want to change the flow of the game overall, right? So if sniping, if for example, people are camping rooftops with LMGs and people can't move around the map, then changes to finding ways to counter that, right, becomes a priority. And so they can make different changes and try and facilitate those changes in different ways. And I think one of the things that we as players run into is we give feedback about specific changes without understanding the difference between a philosophical like changes to fit an overarching philosophy versus the obvious just buffing grenades to make a quick buck on the skins. And when people don't understand that, it makes it challenging to give the feedback appropriately, right? Because if you say, oh, the sniping messes up the flow, well, the reality is, if you look excuse me, if you look at the changes they made to sniping in Warzone 1, they fit Caldera actually very well. Limited the run and gun with snipers, the ZRG and one of the other, Gorenko or whatever, where they were not great snipers for someone who was familiar with and preferred the Kar 98, for example, or the Swiss, right? It was not a good switch. And in a lot of ways, it opened up more of the map because you weren't forced to either counter snipe or deal with snipers in most scenarios, and it just kind of adjusted. It adjusted the way the map played. Which, if you look at different things that they added around that time, you had the redeploy balloons, you had all these different factors together. That the goal of it was to speed up gameplay and speed up the ability to move from one gunfight to another. Something that unlimited quick scoping was an antithesis to in a lot of ways. And so people got upset about the sniping specifically, but they didn't address it in terms of the overarching context of what they were trying to do with the map at that time. And it's easier to look back and see, they were making a lot of changes. You had speed tokens, you had the balloons, you had this, you had all these different ways of moving around the map and reducing the cover, right? So that you didn't have the the bush. And what that did is, if you didn't take out, you really, really restricted people's ability to move. And so that ran counter to their philosophy of trying to make Caldera more playable. So the feedback against the snipers was kind of missing the context in a lot of ways. I mean, and it's not not. I'm not trying to like support the changes that they made or like,
Right.
take sides on it. I'm just, a lot of times trying to understand what a developer is doing requires so much more than just what we, just these little elements that we get sucked into. And I think that's the hardest part of giving feedback constructively is like, you see this little thing that bothers you and you have no way of knowing where that thing fits in the grand scheme of what they're doing, which is kind of why,
or just how big it is internally.
Yeah, which is why something like the Trello board, where you can gather it all together, and you can kind of look at it, and you can almost see sometimes some of the patterns coming up of like where they're struggling and or kind of almost what they're trying to do. It's really interesting.
Gosh, where do I even go from that?
So,
Well,
yeah. We'll edit that out.
Yeah,
That's okay.
No, I mean, basically, the thing is, to me, is like how I don't understand how you can make these overarching changes, though. But I also don't understand how you can like separate the two, right? Like, you can't treat Resurgence the same way you treat, the Big Map BR. They play different. There's just different things about them, right? Like, why? They've basically ruined sniping in the Big Map because of Resurgence. Everyone knows that's why they did it. Like, there has to be a better way, and I don't. Maybe there's something that I'm just not thinking about as far as like maybe they can't separate the two when it comes to that, as far as like weapon balancing and things, or maybe they just don't want to. I don't know.
I think they have some extremely challenging weapon categories just conceptually to balance, because the way snipers and shotgunners especially think is, especially with MW3, you'll always see people saying the 680 is not damaging enough at range. These things are not one-shot kill. What happened to shotguns? You ruined shotgunning in COD. Sledgehammer hates melee people because they keep nerfing throwing knives in Warzone or melee speeds and movement speeds in MP. I just think there's this really tricky space where they have to sort of decide what community of on either side they want to cater to, because you make the melee super fast, fluid, unhindered, one hit, throwing knives included on top of manual knifing, and then all of a sudden you have a whole subset of casual 60-year-old dads saying these fucking kids and their 1,000,000-mile-per-hour knives ruining this damn franchise one day at a time. It's like, then you kind of pull the melee's effectiveness back, and all of a sudden the melee community thinks they hate us, they never cared about us, they've forgotten about us, they're rejecting us to cater to casuals. Same thing with sniping. It's either one-hit kill or they're crap. There's no in-between, so you're going to let someone down no matter how you balance these guns. I'm kind of just sorry to say it that way. I just don't think you'll ever have a perfect balance on anything in COD, because the disadvantaged side of that sub-community, melee snipers and shotguns especially, are always going to feel those nerfs the most and feel mistreated. And I really don't know how they reverse that and not piss off the people who were being killed by said weapon categories. I don't like being rushed by riot shields all day, but people who use riot shields every minute they play COD are so passionate about that style of play that I don't know how to keep their play styles and preferences intact without letting them kind of stomp on my fun. So I think to some extent you have to sort of learn as a fan, especially if you're a long time and you've gotten used to the frustrations of those niche weapon categories. They're going to have some fun too. So you're going to have to, lose a couple streaks, rage a couple matches just to let them have their fun. But just know that whenever we do push against them and we get those nerfs enacted on, they're going to be upset. So it's hard. It's impossible. I think they're playing an impossible game.
First of all, we're 40, and it was the Tonfa or the Cali
45.
sticks. Okay, you're old. It's the Cali sticks. All right?
It was
it's not the knives. It was the Cali sticks.
It's the Cali sticks. Yep.
And those people can go play Battlefield. I don't care about their opinions, even though we just had Rebirth Rat on here last week.
Hey, listen. So, speaking of Rebirth Rat, let me go ahead and say, and this is relevant to kind of what we've been talking about here just last minute or two. So, that new sword, what is it, the Soul Ender or whatever the hell it's called?
Soul Ender.
Evidently, that is the very first weapon that will 100% defeat the Riot Shield.
Yes.
So, part of me, like, jumps for joy over that. But I'm going to be real honest because, you know, over the last few weeks, I've become friends with the Rebirth Rat. So part of, you know who that is, Chad?
I do.
Yeah, we had him on the podcast 2 episodes ago. He's great.
He's probably upset now.
Yeah, part of me weeps for him because I'm like, now I don't want like that. I don't want that nerf on those things because I want him to be able to continue making the fantastic content that he makes.
Right.
So
now they're just gonna be slashing right through his shield.
Yeah. So, you know, like I'm kind of torn or whatever, but
yeah,
you know, like I was telling him, Chad, like there is nothing that makes me more like toxic and immediately petty than somebody trying to riot shield me or trying to knife me. You do those 2 things, I swear to God, if I catch you slipping, I am dropping bags on your ass 100% of the time. God, I'm getting fired. My blood pressure's going up right now talking about that, dude.
And that's, I think, the genius of Sledgehammer. They, instead of outright removing it, which I think could have been possible if they weren't tied to the carry forward, all guns will come over. I think there could have been a world where they removed the right shield or allowed AP rounds, and they could still do this. Allow AP rounds to shoot through them, but then at that point, if you allow an ammo type to negate the riot shield, you've killed that community effectively. Once people figure out how to counter it, so I think they're trying to ride the line of are we going to kill this or are we going to keep on sort of accommodating them?
Sure.
And the perfect in between is you force someone to sacrifice a weapon slot, a melee secondary, to slice right through the shield. Although it's unrealistic to put a blade through a shield that way. They're Sledgehammer. They go fun and over functional. No, it's not right. Fun over practical. Sorry, their games are functional when they want to be, but
when they want to be,
they just had to find that like middle ground with riot shielders, and now I think some shielders like Rebirth Rat are going to hurt for a while. They might find clever workarounds. They're going to start like sprinting away from the sword and kind of going around them to see if they can knock off the aim assist. But I want to wait and see how that plays off. But it was better than just making them fully paper, like shoot through, or removing it. Then you kind of remove that whole sub community, and I don't think that they're the type of studio to kind of just remove sub communities by nature of balancing. So, congrats to them for finding something. It's goofy, but it's why I love them.
Hey, listen, the cheese tax must be paid.
Yeah,
it must be. Listen, that guy has inspired me. Like I legit was thinking earlier on the way home from dropping my kid off. I'm like, man, I should build like a riot shield class with like some kind of melee weapon because, like, you know, to try to be instead of being like Mike, I'm trying to be like the Rebirth Rat. You know what I mean?
So
basically,
it's an interesting conundrum to be in, right? Because yeah, you can break the riot shield, but like you mentioned, you have to sacrifice your secondary in order to carry it, right? Like who's gonna drop into Warzone and grab a sword secondary in on the first loadout, right? Like who's gonna have one of those things in their pocket, right? Like in multiplayer, I think it's great because like for me, I was talking to Jay earlier today. I don't run a secondary pistol or anything in multiplayer. I run a melee, right? So like, you know, I can be the problem that gets Jay's blood boiling. And I was playing Daw's House, which played so well with a Karambit today. As an aside, in case you're wondering. So for me, as soon as I get that sword open, I'm putting it in my secondary immediately. Like that is going to be my go-to because riot shields are still prominent in multi, and the ability to pull out a sword and say, "Ha, eat it," is going to be I'm going to clip the first time, and I'm going to teabag the crap out of the first guy I kill with that. I don't care how many people kill me, and how exposed I am. I'm just teabagging the crap out of every riot shield I killed for a while. So that's going to be my my new thing going forward. But It's a great balance, and I'm not sure how often we'll see it in Warzone, but outstanding choice by
Warzone's tricky.
yeah, and so it's actually correction. It is the second weapon that can break the shield that they've released.
Yes.
The first is the chainsaw underbarrel. Will
Yep.
also break
That
the shield.
can too?
Yes.
They can.
I was unaware of that.
And the Jack Purifier, apparently that flamethrower, I guess, just like...
Well, that's just fire.
Goes right through
so
it?
that'll just burn. It's like a Molotov.
Yeah, that's right. It hits the legs, I guess.
Sub and I are primarily Warzone players. I probably play more multiplayer than he does.
How many days you got on there?
So it's a lot. I don't know. I haven't looked at it, but I mean, I'm consistently playing it. Most days during the week. Like unless I have to get on late. But no, I think that we think in terms of Warzone first. So like I don't really think about like the purifier, the chainsaw thing, and or just the practicality of using any of those things in Warzone. But in multiplayer, I can actually see where those could be, those are beneficial, but that sword in Warzone actually could be beneficial as far as, just having that as a secondary. Like, I think that's...
Or it could be useless the minute they pull out a secondary with projectiles.
Yeah.
That's where I think it's a perfect example of hitting that sort of crux where there is no perfect way to balance it. They could keep modifying the movement speeds or the penetration values or the counter weapons, but at the end of the day, if you do introduce a counter to a really stubborn weapon like the shield, then it comes down to, well, is it even practical to put it in a whole slot of your own on the loadouts? I mean, I'm sure people are like raging me over, kind of meant, telepathically right now who are watching, because they're saying, well, he's giving him so much credit for rebalancing this counter weapon with the riot shield, but is he not considering how we have to disadvantage ourselves on top of being disadvantaged by the shield killing us to then oppose them, like get through them? It's totally valid. I think that's where you get into there is no way to get it right besides just removing it. But the COD has never been really good at removing things that just aren't working. It's just how do we make it work? And they make a dozen different workarounds or counters, but maybe one day we'll get better with that, just outright removing when people just aren't happy. But maybe they do have a pulse on a riot shield community of sorts, or melee community more broadly, and they do feel the hurt when they nerf them or set them back. So if they're empathetic like that and that's holding them back, then I'm willing to take the hit for it. Congrats, you're well-balanced, moral developers.
Sure.
Let everyone have fun.
Yeah.
Sure.
So
that's why I like them.
Yeah, they've definitely, you can see that Sledgehammer takes a lot of creative risks. And so I definitely think they deserve credit for that. Whether, I know sometimes their games can be polarizing. Vanguard definitely was a very polarizing game for a lot of people for a lot of reasons. Caldera sucks. And so, but I will give them this. They do, of all the studios, I think they are willing to take the most creative risk. So, Vanguard, as much as it was
100%
kind of an obnoxious game, it did a lot that was interesting. Like the destructible environments were interesting. It made, the DOS house map kind of like evolve over time, right? Which was good, I thought. And it also had they had the dogs, they had a lot of different opportunities to do streaks and kind of do stuff that you don't see other studios kind of do. Like Infinity Ward very much sticks to its basic middle of the road, boots on the ground. Black Ops is kind of a little more cartoony, but it's still pretty standard a lot of times. So props to them. I'll give them that credit. But overall, like, what are you feeling about the state of like Call of Duty, right? Like, I mean, because right now you got Call of Duty, you got Zombies, you got Warzone. Like, where do you feel we are?
Oh, the loaded question of the day. I think what people want to hear me say is that I'm going to join them on an ongoing battle against Activision and corporate greed and hackers and There are flaws to these games for sure. It's weird because right now I'm in this really challenging pocket where I think my KD is so low that I'm not experiencing the hacker problem at all. I have not encountered a hacker in any mode in the last month and a half. I haven't crashed since mid-season 1 on Zombies, especially. My game's been the most stable it has been in the last 4 or all the COD HQ games combined. All I'm really feeling is the matchmaking, the skill influenced matchmaking, and having more competitive opponents than I ever had before. My personal performance going to record lows, like decade record lows. So I'm being kind of dragged down by just how damn good people have gotten at COD. I think it could be partially algorithmic matchmaking systems working against me in some aspects. Um, Please don't blacklist me, Activision. I still love you. Uh, but it's also just like I do feel something has changed, and I sometimes hesitate to speak on it because I don't think I have enough personally confirmed data, hard numerical stats and proof to show that I understand how the matchmaking systems work. I don't. I never will. It's a simple like college level thinking of don't know what you're talking about, just don't talk about it. So I don't feel entitled or informed enough to talk about matchmaking or cheater situations. I don't have internal metrics on how many cheaters are affecting each mode per day versus 6 months ago. I can have Twitter tell me the cheating issue is worse than it was, but who's to say we aren't just in an echo chamber of high KD, higher competitiveness, like creators or comp players that are experiencing where those kind of skill pockets where cheaters end up are, and the casual players probably aren't experiencing much at all. So um, I'm not gonna sit here all copium huffing. There's no problems. It's perfect, perfectly balanced. No cheaters, no hacking, no SBMM. Sure, the games have their flaws, but the fact that we're in a place now where we have these like multifaceted Warzone, MP, campaign, zombies, spec op, whatever the different modes on offer are, DMZ. I'm seeing COD play with the scale of its gameplay more than ever. War mode taking on, was it 64 players or 32? Uh, Warzone 100 plus players. Zombies now 24 players in the open world. I love when they play with scale or play with just the genre. Extraction shooter being a new one they've tried out lately. We have the tech to have these photorealistic shooters with punchy weapons that feel fun to use and feel smooth and consistent. On these technical refinements that come with age and with experience, with engine improvements, the tech of Call of Duty is the best it's ever been. I won't bullshit people and say that hit detection and movement don't feel infinitely better than they did 10 years ago. But the game just feels good in many ways. Even just putting all of our momentary complaints aside, when it works great. And while everyone's sitting here on the bandwagon of COD's faltering, it's failing, it's dead, it has been dead, it's not relevant anymore. Okay, maybe we're not top of Twitch anymore or top of the YouTube algorithm, but I think in terms of potential, tech, developer talent, developer passion, especially on Sledgehammer's part, we are so close to another golden era that I don't want people to lose that. Don't ever lose sight of that, because that we are so close to what could be, perfect harmony between developers and the community. What I've been trying to do. Learn how to give better feedback. Tell them what you really want, and maybe we'll be there. We'll get there in a couple years. We'll have that pretty functional, fluid game that fits all of our criteria, and we'll be like, "Damn, why were we so angry in the early 2020s? Was it really that necessary? Could we have voiced our opinions just a little bit better, a little bit cleaner on the social forums? Because with a bit more feedback and a bit more patience, I think we're on the verge of the second or third, whatever, huge COD golden era."
Well, it's funny,
best.
Chad, how with what you just said there, it's kind of like my mom always said: if you can't say something nice, don't say anything at all.
Yeah.
And my wife says it's not what you say; it's how you say it. I think that definitely could apply to the Call of Duty community, specifically the one on Twitter. Sub One and I are in this every single day, just like you are. Maybe not at the level that you do, you deal with, but we deal with people that are negative Nancy's, and then we deal with people that want to just basically everything's rainbows and butterflies. And I feel like both of us are somewhere in between. We don't sugarcoat things, and that's also what we built our podcast around, right? Like we're not going to hop on here and just crap on Call of Duty the entire time we're on this podcast. Like we're not interested in doing that, but we're also not going to sit here and act like everything is great, it's perfect, those kind of things. Like, because to me, if you do that, you're a shill one way or the other, right? Like
or you just live in misery.
Right. We're not interested in doing that. We want to provide objective content for people that are within our age demographic and other demographics that, they can turn to and be like, we're going to get like, a real analysis and, one that's fair. I guess maybe that's the word, right? We want to be fair to the developing studios, Call of Duty in general.
And I think it's important, first of all, Chad, I'm loving talking to you because you make me remember being young and being optimistic about things. It's been a while. So I appreciate, you bringing that youthful enthusiasm to the episode today. But for us, I think, the goal is to not just be all about the negativity, but also not be like, completely blind to the problems. And so, it's like, that's been kind of what we've built the podcast on. And one of the reasons that, I think it's been really fun having you on is that we're able to, to kind of hear your viewpoint and have this infusion of optimism in the state of the game. Because, it's like you look around the timeline right now and it's like you would think that somebody took a box of matches into the kerosene storage and started playing with fire for how everybody's responding.
Social media can do that very easily.
Yeah.
But you're right. You know what? I haven't crashed. I haven't crashed on console. I haven't crashed out of a zombies game since week 2. Like, it has been super stable. The game feels very stable. It has crashed very few times. So there's a lot of positivity, especially compared to other years at this point where things have not gone so well. And when things don't go well, we've gotten pretty good feedback from Sledge. I'll be honest.
Yeah, they're getting really good with that.
Does that include? So funny story. I don't know. Well, I know why. So my kid, we don't let him play Xbox really during the week a whole lot, but I let him play a little bit extra. This week because there was one day, that would have been his normal day. He didn't really get to play. So he's on the other day. He's playing for like 2 hours. And he had literally just hit in Zombies, I guess, one of the what is it that you jump through and then like you're like rift. Up in the air?
Oh, the little like purple portal thing.
He hit a rift. He had a 3-plate carrier, a big backpack, and something else.
No.
And because we have it set up where the internet shuts off on his devices at a certain time. No. And it literally cut him off like right when he did that. And he is like pissed. And you know what? My wife doesn't understand that. Like that's not she doesn't get it, but I do. I felt so bad, dude. Yeah. Like it was terrible.
That's one reason why I wouldn't want to be a kid again.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's
gosh.
But the game. I think the game is playing well. I think it's got some issues that need to be worked out, obviously. But yeah, it's got a lot of. It's got a strong future in it. But But I want to dig a little bit into kind of like widen the umbrella a little bit. So you mentioned. COD digs into like extraction shooters. If you look at COD, kind of like the last 2 games specifically, there's a lot of irons and a lot of fires. Where do you feel like the next big thing is going to be? Like,
oh gosh, I really thought the extraction shooter genre was going to take off, but they canned DMZ so quickly. Whether or not for MWZ's sort of space, I will never know. But I hate saying hello and goodbye to new modes, new concepts as quickly as COD has been in the last couple of years. Like where did Outbreak go per se? how do we go from that to extraction and shooter? What was the process of transitioning from Outbreak to MW Zombies? Why did we lose DMZ in between? Why didn't DMZ ever get like solo playlists or non-PvP playlists for those that really wanted it? Um, I wish it was just more to grind for in DMZ long term. It was just there were limits to missions. Come to know, but we just lost communication in maybe season 3 or 4 with that mode, and I just didn't know where the vision was going for that. Nor do I even know if it's ever going to come back. It's hopefully soon, but it's hard to say where we're going to go next because they've had a hard time establishing where they want to be now. We haven't gotten a ton of content for Modern Warfare Zombies since launch. But after riding the high of the launch month, 3 acts of missions and tons of schematics, and that was enough. Camo grinds, Borealis and Bioluminescent, those kind of 3 components were enough to make me dive in like maybe 7 to 8 days played, which is remarkable for me, even especially at my age. I lost a lot of good time to that mode, wondering and daydreaming what it could be, but now we're just inching along. We get exfil streaks for season 2 reloaded today, and that's about it. And one new mission and a charm. It's like, okay, what's the next big jump going to be?
Yeah.
We don't know.
Do you find it? I don't play a lot of zombies. I did when I started. Mouse and Key. I felt like Zombies and Plunder were probably the 2 best bets for me, Call of Duty wise. Like hop in.
Oh, me too.
Just, do those things. Especially Zombies, like run around, shoot some stuff. Whatever. But I was telling Sub earlier. We talked about this in episode 26. It's crazy to me, and that they would miscalculate the way they did. If you're going to have a crossover with The Walking Dead, the ones that live, how the hell are you going to go an entire half season and not have any kind of zombie content at all? Like, I'm upset for the people that love zombies because of that. Like, that's just crazy to me.
It's frustrating that almost everything I've said in the last hour can be written off with, if you don't know what you're talking about, don't say anything. Because same thing with Treyarch. I don't know what their internal struggles are,
Sure.
the pipeline, how many developers they have available for zombies right now. I'm a bit let down that they spent so much time marketing MWZ as a Treyarch Zombies experience with all bold text across their Twitter and Battle.net. Like, they were so proud of MWZ at launch, and there's so much love behind it the first month of content creation and Twitter sort of conversations and what it could become, what the mode could evolve into, and it could still very well evolve into at season 3 and beyond. I do 100% think it's going to have a resurgence in season 3 in some way. Because I do think that Treyarch is just not one to let go of their zombies mode. It's so beloved. They'll find a way to make it work, something work, given whatever time restrictions they have or getting ready for their game this year upcoming. They're busy. I just would have loved to see more progress in content delivery sooner, but then at the end of the day, I'm just the entitled consumer. Everyone gets stuck on like this is what I'm given for my $70, and I sit here going, well, I've gotten 13 to 15 days played in MW3 so far in the first 2 seasons of potentially 6. So a third of the year I've gotten 14 plus days played. Is that not enough for my $70? Like, who am I to say what's my money? Like, what we keep on putting this like very vague expectation, this cloud around the $70, like what it's worth. But not once in the last 18 years have I gotten less than multiple days minimum out of each Call of Duty, if not every single mode within the Call of Duties. So for the players who are online enough and passionate enough to voice their concern about the $70, I really do question just how much time they've gotten out of these games. And, if you have a lot, then if you didn't enjoy the game, why are you still playing it? Enough to harp on the price. So I just think that these games offer a lot of content that we've gotten so good at grinding through. We're burning through camo grinds faster than ever. We're going through 3, 4, 5 acts of zombies missions on MWZ in a matter of days or hours, a couple play sessions. I don't think there's a way to realistically keep that content flow consistent enough for the really top of the top grinders, ironically the most vocal ones, to be satisfied I think I am just wired and trained by experience to outgrind Sledgehammer in terms of content consumed versus delivered. So it's not within my right to say, give me more, because I'm consuming it twice, triple the rate that I was as a kid, like playing World War II or Advanced Warfare. So I've grown up. A lot of us have gotten much better at the game, much more efficient at progressing our whatever levels, operators, weapons, camos. And we just have to sort of expect that there will come a ceiling where we're not always going to be 100% satisfied. And that's okay. You can wait a couple weeks for the next season. You can take a break to go play Helldivers or try other games and breathe a bit. Don't just default to, I ran out of content. I hate you, Sledgehammer. Go to hell. Like, that's just not constructive gaming. So that was a huge spiel, but just like TLDR, when we're going to set expectations on content quantity and our $70, like, we also need to take into account just how much content we're consuming and how fast we're doing it.
So this is the thing. So, and Sub One had a great tweet. You know what I'm talking about. I guarantee you do, Sub.
I think I do.
When the game first came out, and everyone's like giving this game a hard time about oh, it's a remaster and like blah blah blah.
We're gonna go there. Yeah, go there. I want to get to that.
Yes, Sub One Basic,
baby.
Dude. The way he laid it out, it's like you're done, bro. Like you got nothing. And of course, I had people that I shared that tweet with that wanted to push back on it, and I'm like, no, he's 100% correct. Sub, if you don't mind, just kind of cover that tweet just a tad, like the overall, your thought process behind it, because it made total sense to me.
The nuts and bolts of it, and I'm going to come back to your Walking Dead question in a minute. I had some thoughts about it. I was thinking earlier today, but the nuts and bolts of it come down to, everybody remembers DLCs as being like the best way of doing things, and therefore, if the game, probably was originally envisioned as a DLC, and then they pivoted, probably as a result of the pushback against Modern Warfare 2. Like, if they had marketed this as a part of Modern Warfare 2, I think it would have been rejected full send, like on its surface. No matter, even if all they did is change the title to Modern Warfare 2 Part 2, it would have been rejected.
Everybody hated that game.
Right. So that would have backfired on them.
Right at the surface, you have to fix that, right? And the best way to do that is to release it as a new game. But when you take a look at what we used to get from a game's DLC, the paid DLC, and you compare it to what we got in this, at launch, like if you were to have sold us all the content that we have now as a DLC, we'd be spending minimum twice as much, right? Than we got it as a package. So it's kind of a, like, the argument that it's not worth $70 because it's a DLC. To me, from an economic standpoint, just didn't. It's not even that I'm like angry about it. It just doesn't make sense to me. Like, I'm all for criticizing companies for bad behavior, and I don't think that the criticism of this game as a quote unquote DLC is in itself a justified argument based on what we got at launch, not to mention a full year of the free content. Even if you don't buy the battle pass, even if you don't buy any skins, if all you do is collect the stuff that you get for free, you get 2 weapons. You get what, like 4 to 5 weapons a season. You get new multiplayer maps. You get, we're getting new. Well, not new, but we're getting additional rebirth maps. We got a brand new Warzone map, right? So the amount of content that you get for that $70 price point is in terms of the old DLC model of, you know, I think it was 5 maps for $15 or whatever. It's crazy, right? It's crazy to make that
Yeah.
argument. In my opinion, just based on the facts. I get that people are generally unhappy with the state of COD in some ways, which is fine. There are fair criticisms to be made,
Of course.
and I think going back to, you know, some of the original discussions is that if we make the fair criticisms fairly, right? Like, we don't hold Sledgehammer responsible for the sins of Activision or the sins of Infinity Ward, right? And we acknowledge that they are improving what they were given, that they are providing us a better game than we had before. And then you criticize the things that they are doing wrong, right? Then I think that creates a better feedback loop and a better situation. And honestly, it fosters a better attitude. So, you know, I definitely appreciate the work that you're doing to do that. But I wanted to circle back to what Jay brought up about The Walking Dead, right? For example. So I think one of the things that we don't understand, and this is something that we will probably never really understand, but having dealt with partnership issues and both in streaming, right? You know, I have a couple of partnerships and some stuff I've dealt with, but also in the business world, having dealt with this sort of stuff before. I think something that we're not privy to, that we're not understanding very well, is what is the licensing relationship between these companies and Activision Call of Duty. So The Walking Dead, for example, right? Like, if you look at the characters and the stuff that they provide to us in the bundles and the way that they are incorporating the game, there's very specific ways in which The Walking Dead treats zombies, for example. And I can absolutely see a scenario in which they don't want to create confusion between the Walking Dead brand and how they handle zombies and what Call of Duty comes up with. Because it could be very easy to create a scenario in which Call of Duty zombies and Walking Dead zombies get intermingled, right? And the branding and the way that they're discussed and the way that they're dealt with, that leads people to believe, for example, that some form of Call of Duty's, you know, the ether worm or some ether environment is coming to The Walking Dead in some capacity with a new spin-off or something. And it creates a problem for the show when they don't deliver that, but they have seemingly advertised that via the crossover, right? And so I can see them being very careful about what they want Call of Duty to do with the time in which that they are actively doing a crossover.
Right.
So
that makes sense.
Yeah. So in terms of like,
definitely
why
seems like they're trying to cater to. I keep going with that. Yeah, keep going.
Yeah. So it's just like, you know, in the vein of trying to be fair in the criticism, like, you know, it could be they're just out of resources and they haven't allocated resources to it, but you know that. It seems unlikely given how far in advance they usually plan these seasons out. And I could see getting the Call of Duty crossover coming with some kind of zombies blackout, where it's like they're not allowed to push content for zombies. They're limited on what they can do and advertise, and it wouldn't maybe make sense to release a bunch of new zombies content and then not be able to advertise it in any relation to The Walking Dead. And we've seen brands do this before where it's like, we know that they restrict what you can say around the use of their brand and their logos and stuff. So something like that. I mean, hopefully
that could be it.
Hopefully that sort of thing is where the drought has come from, and we'll see a resurgence of zombies content going forward, because I think that would be great. As I've said before, I enjoy the mode. So, and we just got a new story mission that I've read a couple of people's comments about it, and they loved it. They think the new story mission is great and very well done. There's a new Easter egg. So, I think it's let's keep our optimism up and keep an eye on things. But we're kind of running low on time, trying to keep it under our window of time. So wanted to roll forward into kind of our final segment of the episode, and this is our one of my personal favorites, but the kill of the week. So what we do is we kind of rehash our kill, one of our favorite kills of the last week. Given that this is a second episode recorded back to back with the previous week's episode, there's going to be a little bit of a pre-season 2 reloaded kill of the week. So if there's a reference that doesn't make sense anymore, it's not our fault. We're just behind the time. We're recording into the future. Is what we're doing. But
what up, future?
I will lead off. My kill of the week was playing the duos, the mini royale duos mode with a buddy of mine, 38-year-old dad, and he had been dead almost the entire game. I could not find a buy station that wasn't camped to death for the life of me, and I ended up, if you remember, kind of by the river, there's a fire station, and there's like kind of a set of ruins, like an arch overlooking a gas station or something, or a convenience store. And it's like half a bridge that's left. I'm up on top of this thing, kind of hiding from the world. It's getting to be the final circle. It's final circle's about to have its big pool, where it dramatically shifts over and then starts to close down. And I have, for the first time since Caldera, picked up a heartbeat sensor. Ooh. And I'm like, I wonder if this thing's worth running. Pull it out, and sure enough, there's a dude in front of me. I look, and I can see him. Grab the XRK, one-tap him, turn and finish him off. And I'm like, well, that was fun. Heartbeat it again, and I got a guy behind me now, and his back is to the gas. So I peek around the corner, and at first I don't see anything, and then I see the one dude stand up, dome him, and as I do, I pick up his partners down, laying down plating, dome him, collect the double kill, and then patting myself on the back, then immediately get wiped. But it was quite exciting to hit the 2-piece right after that other one and discover that the heartbeat sensor actually has a viable use. It's no longer that OP crutch it used to be. Jay, do you have one queued up?
Yeah. I was playing some multiplayer earlier, trying to do these challenges to unlock that new LMG. And it's so funny. So I had to end up switching on a couple of the challenges over to hardcore because it's just really rough to try to do quick scopes with, that jack optic or, get a double kill with the Holger, which is one of the challenges. Mm-hmm. So we switched over to hardcore, and I'm running, on Wasteland. And I can't remember if it was kill confirmed or TDM. Those are pretty much the two modes that I play. But I'm looking out towards church, and I literally see just this small sliver of just this rounded top of the head. I just dialed in on this dude. I'm just like, bop, I kill him. And then I see his teammate over here to my right, and then I'm like, bop, I kill him. And then I see another teammate here, and I'm like, bop, bop. So I got 2 of those double kills that I needed in about 15 seconds. If
Beautiful.
That. Granted, it's hardcore, so I'm going to calm down. I'm not going to, but it's just, to bear that first kill, though, to just see just the sliver of that dude's head above the brick wall and then hit him with it, because I switched to semi-auto because you can do that in hardcore, and yeah, it was great.
Brilliant. Mm-hmm. Chad, it was a memorable one. Sutton. So you have the advantage because you can reach back farther because you don't do this every week, so you could reach back a little farther and we'd never know.
Yeah, we'll
never
know.
I've had such few remarkable clips in MW3. My performance has just gone so low that I'm going to make the really cheesy outro of, this week I loaded into a match of Reddit.com, and in a matter of 48 hours, I killed off 21 bug reports.
Okay,
And,
fair enough.
And my mind is just mush. My mind is just all jumbled bug stuff. And I played like 2 matches of DOS House today, but in terms of being in a mode where I can actually pull off cool clips, I wasn't. I was just in Zombies, doing my new missions and schematics and Ether Portal Rift stuff. So I need some more time to really. That's my biggest issue this year. I've doubled down on feedback collection so hard that I've some days forgotten that I'm a gamer, that I can have fun too, that I can be the consumer and let Sledgehammer just pull the ride along, and I'll just have fun. So they've. Just to give one more little credit, Sledgehammer, they've had devs reach out to me through DMs and say, like, make sure you're taking time to play our game too. We made some awesome stuff and we want you to experience it. And they're just so down to the human level. They're so loving and communicative and transparent that like they're the big reason why I've been doing all this stuff. So
great.
It's been a fun experiment, and it's been fun connecting with players like me and content creators and developers alike. And the only message I want to leave behind is that we need to be good to our developers and even better to our games, because they've brought us a lot of joy, a lot of fun, a lot of good memories, a lot of relief from a chaotic world. So we keep these games going through our own actions, and I look forward to whatever COD's going to do next, because it has a damn bright future 10, 20 years ahead.
Well, outstanding. I did poll the judges while you were talking, and they did come back and agree that we will accept that as your kill of the week. 21 bugs down. Outstanding.
Let's go.
But thank you, Chad, for coming by. Really appreciate your time. Your insights. Everything that you do for the community is a bright spot on the old Twitter timeline every time I see your name roll up. So keep it up. Make sure you do take some time to enjoy the game and touch a little grass here and there. But thank you again for coming in tonight and talking with us, Jay. As always, my illustrious partner, thank you for coming by and being the other half of this podcast. I appreciate you. Once again, I am SuboneKD, and this has been the Slightly Above Average Gaming Podcast. Thank you for coming by. We will catch you next time. This has been SuboneKD, along with J007tv and the Slightly Above Average Gaming Podcast. We're logging off now, so we'll see you next time.